Hi everyone, welcome to another off the cuff chat with me, FPL Mez, and I've got a very special guest with me today, FPL underscore Fran, or FPL Fran. I initially sort of started searching for you, and I was like, why can't I find you? And then I noticed the double underscore. So Fran, welcome. It's lovely to have you today.
Thank you for having me.
So yeah, thank you for agreeing to come on. And as you know, like these are very informal, unprepared, off the cuff, conversations about all the things. And so, yeah, it's a really good opportunity to just talk and get to know you a little bit better, but also to just have a random conversation as well. Like, I don't think we get many of those opportunities. There's some very serious conversations about, FPL, and especially when things are when shit's hitting the fan, things are going wrong. It becomes a bit too serious. And I feel like it has been over the last sort of, month or so. So look, this is a really good opportunity to just kind of have a pretty chilled out conversation, light, and get to know you, get to know how you've been playing FPL, how you're doing over the last, sort of couple of weeks, especially, because it has been pretty crazy. Over to you, Fran. And so what I'm going to do on the screen as well is just change a few things along the way, and I will drop you my team in the chat. So if anyone's listening right now, they can at least sort of see my team, and maybe Fran can sort of chuck it in the chat as well as we're sort of chatting along. So I'll drop my team in there, so you know what we're talking about when we're talking about our team. So how are you, Fran? Like what's been happening for you over the last sort of, you've had a pretty hectic month or so, and just full disclosure, I've got a picture of you kissing your beautiful wife while you're away in Colombia. So yeah, tell us about the last couple of months, basically.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously, as a content creator, I'd say it is quite tough to sort of make sure you can have travel plans and things like that, particularly when effectively throughout the entire week you are sort of recording content, and you're actually more relaxed on the weekend. So it sort of mirrors just like a regular job, and so I usually do a lot of my content after hours. But then I did have obviously a 2 week holiday to actually get to celebrate sort of a wedding with my wife, because we got married in a civil marriage around a year ago, but due to COVID, we didn't really actually get a chance to celebrate with too much of her family. So we had a great time in Colombia actually instead, around 2-3 weeks ago. Got to see a lot of her family in her hometown and celebrate in a sort of traditional Colombian wedding. And that's probably the photo. I don't know which photo.
Yeah, it's the photo of you, so kissing your wife, and you've got all your friends and family around you celebrating with you. But then there's a bonus photo, if you remember the bonus photo. And I'm just putting that on the screen as well. And I think those that can't see, I'll try and sort of post it as well, so you can see what I'm seeing over here. But there's a bonus photo there. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the bonus photo as we go.
Yeah, so that's sort of the stage of the night in terms of the wedding, where you sort of go towards the bride, and then actually I'm not actually sure what it's called in English, but you sort of perform like almost like a celebratory dance, and then you take almost like effectively like a ribbon off of her ankle. And so
oh,
I didn't
okay,
actually know what to do. It was my first wedding, and I was quite drunk at the time anyways, and I was asking my wife, what should I do? And then she was like, oh, Magic Mike. And I was like, Magic Mike, okay. So yeah, so then I did a dance, and that was just mid photo, I think, is where they caught me effectively.
That is so good.
Yeah, that was it. But no, it was a great night.
Yeah, it's such a great photo as well. Like I think it sort of humanizes, I feel like, just, of content creators, because you are a content creator, but also, just humanizes us as FPL managers. And, I also noticed recently there was, I think like every international break, there's always like tweets and things going around. And it's really nice to kind of see people having more social sort of conversations as well around that. So yeah, it's nice to get to know the FPL community at the same time, and this just basically humanized, like just. I mean, we all know that you're human and that other content creators are human as well. And we're all sort of like avid football fans and, love watching football, but also, there's a person behind that. So it was really nice to see this and sharing a little bit of your life with all of us as well. That, getting married during COVID wouldn't have been easy. Period either, and especially without sort of friends and family as well. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I've actually just tried to chuck it in there as well, so it's less of the very romantic gesture and more of the questionable sort of dance that was going on that I've posted.
Sure.
So Fran, I've got a question for you around, when you started sort of traveling, like when you went abroad and everything, you made a conscious decision to carry on, publishing content as well. So you were still doing your videos, you were still playing FPL. How did that go? How did you find, doing that?
So I've done it before in terms of, so I think the year previous I went to a vacation on Spain, but my setup probably wasn't as good. But I actually have sort of two almost like remote cameras that are very small. I can actually kind of show it now. They almost look like this effectively.
Yeah.
The cameras that I just carry around, and I've got two of them. And I just carry them around with me alongside with my microphone and just webcam camera. So I usually take those when I'm traveling now.
Yeah.
Because the FPL content circuit is usually year long. And so I think, look, the reality is last year when I was doing content and I felt like I was making content in game week 1, but actually very late. And I missed the sort of entire preseason. What I sort of recognized was, I think also these sort of social media algorithms also understand that you have to sort of actively be posting. And it's sort of like, you can see, for example, on Twitter that there are,
That's
such
true.
things as like dead accounts almost, where you have like celebrities that have maybe 2 million, 3 million followers. They stop posting for a while. If they do post, the sort of impressions doesn't really compare to the amount of followers they do actually have. And so I made a conscious decision basically to dedicate myself to as much FPL content as possible.
Yeah.
And then in terms of actually, for example, being able to manage my FPL team, things like that. I take it probably too seriously. I don't think I would ever miss a deadline, to be quite honest. I missed some deadlines last year, and that already cost me. And
oh, really?
I think the best thing and the best example already, this was already something we saw in game week 1, right? The simple decision of Gabriel versus Saliba.
Yeah.
It just means that you have to actually be online, and not only online, but also make sure that you're actually open to almost all sources of communication. Like a few friends of mine only managed to get wind of that, through a group chat where someone in the last second sort of tells all that Andy has a leak. And I remembered instantly last season, Andy had a leak on Saka having an illness. And that was a huge shock to me because obviously, I mean, look at tonight, Saka plays again. He gets injured,
I know.
Saka always starts. And when that came true, I knew Andy was obviously quite authentic in terms of his leaks and the sort of source that he had from Arsenal. So Gabriel being benched, I immediately moved on that. But some people wouldn't have actually gotten that information, and that would have already hurt them so far. I mean, I think it's a difference of 0.4 or 0.5 of transfer value, which, for example, has a lot of dividends to your long-term FPL season. Like some people have done studies on how much just capturing one price rise is worth in FPL, and I think in the long term, it's actually worth around 1.5 points.
Yeah.
In FPL.
It's insane. I didn't know that, but that's insane. And this week alone, I feel like I've lost out on so many price rises, so many price drops. But I loved how you managed to navigate that while you were traveling. And it's interesting because obviously you're thinking about it from the algorithm point of view. And if you sort of pause on releasing some content, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's on Twitter or or X, wherever it may be. it is challenging, from that perspective. When I went traveling last year, I went backpacking around Peru, and look, it was supposed to be a super low kind of, I wasn't supposed to be connected like that. That was the whole sort of, the reason for that trip itself. And so I found it very difficult to stay across, FPL. And the thing is, if I was having a bit of a shit season last season, then I probably would have, disconnected entirely. But I still felt like I needed to stay connected because I was having a decent season. I think by the time I'd gone traveling, I was in the top 20K. And so I wanted to maintain that in some shape or form. And so I missed a deadline while I was away. I went early on my transfers while I was away. I just knew I wasn't going to get much connection, like Wi-Fi connection or just kind of mobile connection and stuff. Because I was, backpacking around. I went to Machu Picchu and did Inca Trail, and there was no signal. There was just nothing. And I remember sort of organizing, I was trying to organize my trip around my hike. And, the trip, the hike, and when FPL deadlines were going to be. But yeah, I noticed like you were releasing content. I was just like, wow, this guy, I can't believe how well you were able to, do that while you were away and still, still keep going.
Yeah, no, I think you're right as well. Just in terms of, for example, when you're having a good season, that also stimulates you as well. Like, for example, because obviously I'm trying to grow my community as well. And so when you see that sort of reception as well, that sort of stimulates you to continue, promoting your work. And that's something I also recognize this season where, in years past, I probably wasn't doing much of a self-promotion job. And I realized no one else is going to promote me but myself. So I did take a conscious effort this season to sort of, be more active on Twitter, share more content. But I also, I don't share content, for example, just for the sake of sharing content. Anything I say, I think I would like to think that people would know that I mean it very
You
seriously.
mean it. Yeah.
Other than when I'm being deadpan sarcastic, which some people miss. But, yeah, I mean, that's just sort of the way I am. And I realized that I actually did a little bit more TikTok this season. I opened an account. It's done really well. It mostly because I got that sort of magical game week in game week 3 with my transfers there. And that was also something that was, very motivating on vacation to have something as crazy as that happen. Like the impressions on Twitter were up, TikTok views were up. And that just sort of inspires me to keep going at times. Particularly since YouTube, I think, is a little bit different where it's a platform where the progress feels a little bit more linear for me. At least it has been like this for the last 2 years. Whereas on Twitter, I've grown a lot this season, and on TikTok, it's been quite wild, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic to hear, and I completely agree. I think it's important to be, putting out content that you actually stand behind, you care about, and you can actually back it up as well. So, I know I've seen a lot of, no names here or anything like that, but I've seen a lot of content creators who, it's clickbait, right? There's a lot of clickbait going on. There's a lot of content, that is being released on YouTube and other channels, TikTok, whatever it may be, just to get that interaction, get that sort of, and obviously there's a lot of monetization around that. And although, look, we don't want to go into conversation around that, in this particular spaces, but it just goes to show that there's so much there that can be done. And, everyone is sort of hell-bent on trying to make the most that they can in whatever platform that they're choosing as well. But one of the things I really loved about your content, Fran, was your cheat sheets. And I think that's where it kind of, I felt like, I'm not sure when you started playing FPL. So yeah, can you share a little bit more about how you started playing FPL, but also what motivated you to start creating content and led you to these amazing cheat sheets? So to those that don't know, Fran does these amazing cheat sheets, which are your one-stop shop for just understanding, what's been going. Like, obviously there's a lot of data in there, but there's some really good like content that you're talking about around those players as well from an eye test point of view, which is very handy. So the one-stop shop sort of, thing is very, very good. But anyway, how did you get there though?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a long journey. I'd say I was actually doing content maybe 3 to 4 years ago within football, or within the lens of football with a friend of mine, just a real life friend who was my roommate at the time. And we were recording videos on sort of post-match analysis, and it was quite rudimentary. we even started, for example, just like this, but in a much more informal setup. It was just a Zoom call effectively, with even, for example, the Zoom screen in the video. So a lot has improved since then. But it was a case of where we both wanted to create content. We were both avid football fans. I decided, obviously, to sort of pick up skills with relation to content creation. So, the Adobe Suite, for example, started to pick up on how to use it, Photoshop and Illustrator in particular, and that sort of want to create more videos and also to improve week on week has sort of led me to my YouTube, I guess, videos being the way they are today. But even like as of 1 year ago, I think I was literally recording without a green screen, and there were crates
Yeah.
in the back because I was ready to move into a new place and I couldn't. But as far as the cheat sheets and also fantasy playing, in the Euros, I actually decided to make fantasy content because I just wanted to play the Euros. I'm a Spaniard, so I wanted to support my team as well with a fantasy team.
Yeah.
But I also generally watch so much football that I thought I could maybe create some content tangentially to the post match analysis or even the previews that we were doing for certain European games. So we did that, and actually all my Euro fantasy videos blew up. I mean, more so than any other videos that we've done in the past. And unfortunately, my friend isn't a huge fan of fantasy, so we saw a bit of a direction for the channel where the fantasy videos were getting views, but I think he had no interest really in it. And it's not even like a decision where he wanted to pursue fantasy, because we were struggling really with the post-match analysis videos, the reviews. It's very hard to sort of make into that space, and sometimes you don't even know exactly what the correct solution is, whereas
Yeah.
this was sort of the one big break we had. But he sort of let me sort of ride this wave with fantasy, so I stepped into doing FPL content on 2021 um, as well, and at the back half of the season. But in reality, I started making content for the 21-22 season. I would
Oh,
say
yeah,
I've played
nice.
FPL in years past. So if you, I mean, feel free to show my rank history if you want, but you'll see that I have, I think, let me have a look. So I played in 17-18. I had a 2.4 million finish. 18-19, I had 6.2 million finish. And you can probably tell that that's because I had a debt account in 17-18 where I got fired by my job because it was a crypto business and the industry collapsed and I didn't have any reason to play in that league. And then on
Yeah.
18-19, I played for, I think, effectively 7 or 8 game weeks, um, and just played in a mini league to beat my friend. And he was complaining that I was using all the chips to beat him, but I did. And then I took a break. And then for some reason, 2021 was that sort of season where I was making content with my friend and I was just playing FPL, as a bit of a fan. I didn't even look at content, wasn't on Twitter at the time. Didn't even know double game weeks were a thing. Didn't really know how to plan around calendars,
Yep.
but managed to
Story of
luck
my
into a
life.
56K finish. And,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. It's like when you get that sort of good luck on FPL, you probably suddenly become a lot more focused than you are. And then I think that
That's
second
right.
season in 21-22, I had a worse finish actually. But part of that too is because I think the source of information that I was using was probably worse, and I wasn't really able to make sense of my decisions then. But I was making content, and I was watching a lot of football. I made some pretty rogue decisions. I remember I even went for Cornet, who joined Burnley, of course, and,
Oh,
and he had
yeah,
a
that's right.
he had a very interesting stint where he started from
Yeah.
left back to left wing to striker, and then got injured in the suspension game, in the game right before, or sorry, I think he got injured versus Newcastle, which was at the time a prime fixture before Eddie Howe had came and sort of revolutionized the team with Bruno Guimaraes. And also, I think I was also burnt with the snow suspension versus Tottenham. So little things
Nice.
like that. But actually, that season also told me that, and also with the COVID seasons too, it sort of let me know that planning was so essential in terms of double game weeks and blank game weeks. It also made me think differently about how FPL points are earned. So, for example, when we look at goal scoring odds or assist odds each week,
Yeah.
you'll never really see too many players above 50%. So, whilst
Yeah.
we sort of look at an FPL player each week and we sort of think, oh, this guy's due for a 14 pointer, that is so unrealistic of an expectation. The average point for most players is
That's
between
right.
4 to 6 points.
Yeah.
So that's something I learned where, because the appearance points, as you can see in this example, are so crucial. I just knew I was losing out to a lot of managers who had planned better than me, who had gotten 1 to 2 extra double gaming players, who had avoided
Yeah.
hits, things like that. So that's why I took a little bit more of an analytical approach as well, sort of looking at objective metrics like expected goals and things like that, and also studying the real correlations, I would say, to true FPL points, which I would say is, for example, something like, as I said, expected goals, because there are studies obviously that show, for example, expected goals linked to future expected goals, which
Yeah.
also, links to goals. So that's very helpful from an FPL point of view. And obviously we have a little other things like expected assists, penalty assists that are just fantasy related, but most of the time you're getting that from your XG. And so I took a bit more of an analytical approach last season, which is why I think going back to the cheat sheets, cheat
Yeah.
sheets were always something that I did from even the Euro videos. I just love the idea of tiering players and sort of thinking, if I order everyone in terms of their efficiency as a player, like based on budget, let's say if I get my captains out of the way and I have them sorted, I always like ordering in my head the efficiency of a player within certain price points
Yeah.
and prioritizing certain things. So that's where the cheat sheet came about. And I liked the tier list system there. But progressively, as I said, because I adopted a bit more of an analytical approach alongside watching games. And oddly, actually, during COVID, we could watch every game back to back. But now you actually are back with the regular football calendar, which is
Yeah.
actually 3 p.m. Saturday games where you have like 5 games being played at once. I can only watch 2. And probably it's also illegal to watch 2, I think. So when you're at a pub, for example, and
Don't want to know.
I'm at FPL meets. Exactly, yeah. When you're at FPL meets and you're sort of just looking at a goal show, it's pretty depressing. But I want to be watching the football, so I can't.
Yeah,
do
it's
that
really
as
hard
much anymore.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Exactly.
Like over here as well, we've got Goal Rush, and I mean, I'm not going to complain about the timings of watching football over here. It's crazy. Like I will always try and watch Liverpool play, and even like the weekend match. I feel like it's too soon to talk about the Tottenham Liverpool match. And there's been there's plenty on Twitter. There's plenty on Twitter about that. We can touch on it ever so slightly, definitely. But I try and watch Liverpool play as much as possible, and I'll try and catch Goal Rush as well, and watch as much as I can. But it can be like 2-3 in the morning, and I think with the clocks changing, so we just had one clock change, which is why I was able to do spaces with you this morning. It's I think when we started it was 7:30 a.m. for me, so I was up a couple of hours earlier. Normally get up quite early, and so I think like the times aligned a little bit as well. And I noticed that you were up quite late usually as well, so it was a good opportunity to hit you up and try and get on here. We are getting a few more people joining, and I truly appreciate that. We have got the Champions League that is still on, so there is matches still being played. I'm not sure if you're Fran, you've probably got your eye on Real Madrid there, being a huge Real Madrid fan. So I'm not sure how long there is to go there, but I really do appreciate everyone tuning in despite sort of some of the matches going on. And I have to admit, I completely forgot initially that, the Champions League was on. And then I thought, well, you know what? This is going to be recorded. So those of you that are listening right now, this is being recorded on Spaces, but I'm also, if you're first time here as well, I'm actually doing Spaces to YouTube. So started doing this, just over a month ago now, where I'm having a great conversation. I hope anyway. In my opinion, it's a great conversation with those of you that are tuning in on Spaces, and I'm just capturing it as a video, and I pop that up on my YouTube channel as well. And so please go ahead and subscribe to that if you have a moment, and you can check out the video on there as well. You'll see some of the visuals that I'm using. So apologies for those that are listening. You won't get the full sort of extent of the visuals, but we'll post our teams and so forth as we're sort of, talking through our game week and future sort of transfers as well. So Thanks for sharing, Fran. Like, that was really lovely to hear about. I've actually got your, rank history on the screen as well. And I completely agree. I think there is an element of when you're doing well, you want to play more. You want to, you're conscious about those, transfers and decisions that you're making and the rest of it. And I definitely did that a little bit more last year. And this year, I feel like I'm going rogue a little bit with my transfers now. So, Fran, I'm going to just, while we're sort of talking about your rank history and everything, I've got your game week 7. Obviously, this probably doesn't include... Actually, did you have any players playing today?
No, not at all, actually. So, finally, I was not planning to have players in this fixture, but in hindsight, I probably would have.
Yeah. So, Fran, do you want to just tell us like how your game week has ended? Obviously, if you're looking at live FPL, you can sort of tell us your current rank, at the moment. Not that rank is important. We don't talk about ranking on
rank
this as much
anyways,
It's far too depressing. But tell us how you've gone on this this week.
So my live rank is 281,000 because I round up. As far as this week, I got 48 points. It was okay. I think ultimately Trippier carried most of the game week, and all the other players that I had for the last few weeks did okay. United assets continued to do poorly. So did Pickford, and Bumo as well, rather poor. Haaland captaincy as well, as opposed to a Morris captain, which I think obviously probably a 50-50 for most managers, at least those who are analytically inclined, but that's worked out well for managers who went on the Morris path. But yeah, pretty tame game week for me. Trippier and Saliba actually just being the standouts, given Saka's ownership. I did actually make a move towards going from Gusto to Dallo because I had obviously Gusto, who I planned to play these two fixtures, and
Yeah.
pretty sad that Chelsea got a clean sheet without him. But that still meant that I got Dallo over Estupinian, so that's a 4 point difference. And the only reason why I said I would have, in hindsight, wanted to have a Luton player is because I think if you don't know already, I have actually activated my wild card for Game Week 8. And I didn't actually plan
Yeah.
on doing so. I was planning for a Game Week 10 wild card, and I've spoken to you about this as well, like privately.
Yeah.
But I did make the decision to sort of activate the wild card because I think a lot of the price pressure that I was seeing sort of took away from how strong or how robust maybe a draft that I could create, particularly since I am still inclined to go Salah Haaland at this moment in time. But it looks a little bit worse now with Eze being injured. But having said, I would have probably gone Taylor to Morris if I planned to dead end in Game Week 8, but I did not do so. Instead, I actually had Sterling playing for 0
Yeah.
points once again.
Yeah. I'm not going to talk about my team just yet, but I'm curious to hear what was happening in your mind when Sterling wasn't sort of announced on that team sheet to
Yeah.
start.
I think because I wildcarded already, I was already pretty zen about it.
Okay.
But obviously it's a prime fixture. So when you watch and I watched the Chelsea versus Fulham first half, I mean Fulham were all over the place. There was probably four clear chances for Chelsea to score, and I was thinking, Sterling probably would have enjoyed this game. But also, I mean, you could argue his poor finishing probably would have let him down, just like Broja's first chance. But
Yeah.
yeah, ultimately. I think because I wildcarded, I was already okay with it. And ultimately, I guess you can keep Sterling if you're someone who's, let's say, still inclined to wildcard a bit later or hold on to Sterling just because you've got the Burnley fixture next. And I mean, Burnley weren't too impressive today either. So
No. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, not too many regrets, I think, owning Sterling. I've been more than fortunate as a Sterling owner because I pretty much got him the only week that he got points this season.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. And of course he had his Stupinian on the bench there. Lucky you. I had him,
Yeah, that was
subbed in.
helpful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What sort of made you go Dallo? Because we've not seen Dallo appear on many FPL
Teams in
managers
general, yeah.
teams. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was planning, for example, like a Game Week 10 wild card, and I was thinking over those three fixtures, they're really good. Now, obviously, I've just watched United concede 3 goals to Galatasaray, so
Yeah.
the extent to which the United defense can actually hold up versus a poor team, even from an attacking point of view, is now a little bit debatable. But
Yeah.
I was planning, for example, just two home fixtures for Crystal Palace and Brentford, two teams that aren't particularly great on attack, especially since Brentford. I think obviously they started off hot in the first 5 fixtures, but you can see obviously with tougher opposition, with more fixtures as well, their XG has continued to slip. They had effectively zero chances versus Newcastle, and then in the Everton game, to be honest, they were quite lucky because they only had one chance, and obviously Pickford failed to save that chance. But
Yeah.
that was that, and then I was thinking, obviously Sheffield United playing up until that fixture would make a lot of sense as a Dallo owner, and I might still own Dallo to be quite honest, because
On your wild
the
card,
fixture run
yeah.
is still Brentford at home. It's still Luton at home within the distance, Fulham who still can't really score, and then also Sheffield United, as I said. So I still might persist with Dallo, but most of the wild card was stimulated by wanting to sort of switch around my Man United players with these Spurs players, and also recognizing that Saka probably isn't a great hold for the next two fixtures just because they're
No.
poor, and now probably worse because he might or
Yeah,
might
he
not be
might be
injured.
out.
I've actually read
Yeah.
news that he's okay, that he ran into the tunnel, but that's still not a good look. And
No.
yeah, I wonder whether Arteta even risks him for the Man City game.
Yeah, and it's such a shame because I would have imagined that he wouldn't be starting in this, the midweek game,
Yeah.
just because they've got City coming up, and that's probably going to be one of the biggest games for them, right? If not the biggest game in the Premier League for them. So yeah, I was very surprised, to see that, and it's very annoying as well because I was toing and froing about transferring Saka out and didn't really get around to doing it because I also have Wilson in my team, and so I wasn't sure like where I was going to go
Yeah,
with that.
that's been really tough.
Yeah, I'm going to just switch the screen to like my team and maybe even start with Trippier, and the reason why I sort of called this off the cuff, I've got 99 problems but Trippier ain't one. Trippy's not a problem. He's been so good. I've had him last couple of game weeks now, and I'm really happy. Like, got his 18 points and then 12 points, and I remember seeing a couple of tweets where people had said, "Oh yeah, he's probably not going to get another double digit. He's not going to see many double digit hauls," and it's possible, right? Like we've seen 3 now, I think, or 2. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he
2
got.
from Trippier so far. He
Yeah.
got I think 8 points versus
8
Brentford home.
points. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so nearing to it, but I reckon we will see a little bit more of that from Trippier, especially because they've got a decent run of fixtures as well, and we are sort of looking at doubling up on in our teams, doubling up on Newcastle defense especially. But honestly, when I started thinking about a wild card, so for context, I got 40 points this game week minus 2, basically. So, obviously on the screen it says 40 points, but I've got Estupinian coming off the bench for Wilson. So I've got Pickford in goal, Walker, Trippier, Gabriel. I'm glad I held on to Gabriel, I sort of persevered with Gabriel. And he's dropped in price a fair bit as well. I think it's like 4.7 now, but I'm glad that I held on to him because I, managed to get a couple of clean sheet points there. And then loads of 2s from Maddison, Mbumo, Rashford, Foden. So there were a bunch of 2s that came in there. Saka's 9.2, which could have been so much more if he hadn't have passed on those bloody penalties. like a charity case to everyone. Here you go. You get a penalty. You get a penalty. I was like, what the hell are you doing? I'm surprised I haven't sworn so yet. In this. Actually, I did sort of give you some warning that coming onto spaces, but also that it might end up being a bit of a therapy session for me because you just can't make it up. Like the season I've had so far. I went with Wilson, and there was nothing wrong with Wilson, right? Everything was like, I thought it was a good pick. He scored a goal, although last game week, or the game week prior even, I did wake up to 8-0 and thought, yeah, that's a Wilson hat-trick, brace. Oh,
Yeah.
he just got 1? Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
But Trippier's not an issue, but I think it's going to start becoming an issue, right, when it comes to wildcards. And so, I feel so guilty. I'm thinking about wildcarding in 9 at the moment because my team is pretty shit. Like, I'll be completely honest. It's looking pretty dire. Like, it's looking really bad. I've got no bench. So I've got Mubama on the bench and I've got Baldock on the bench at the moment. And, I've got 2 freeze transfers. I have gone early on one of them. So full disclosure, I, went a little bit earlier because I wanted cash in the team. And so I took out Estupinian and brought in cash already. So I went early on my transfer. But I've got a second transfer and I've been holding out trying to work out whether I bring in, do I take out Wilson and bring someone else in? I've got enough money to go Watkins. I've got, I've been thinking about Darwin as well. And of course, Saka is now potentially a problem, not sure. But also, I wanted to get out Rashford. Like, I mean, just seeing, I haven't seen the, so did you say it was 3? Yeah, 3-2?
3-2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, 3-2. And I haven't watched the match. I think I have no idea how they've played other than sort of seeing Twitter's reaction to, the Man United side. But I'm not feeling good about it at all. So,
I mean, Arsenal lost as well. They lost 2-1 to Lens.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Pretty big results.
Big results, definitely. Yeah, really odd there. But I'm not feeling good about having Man United players. But I know you've got Are you thinking about
I've
keeping
got
Man
one
United
so
players?
far.
Yeah, okay.
I think I'll keep Dallo, but it does actually depend on whether I maybe go Haaland-less, which I guess you might, which is not a joke actually, because structurally I was intent on playing a midfield five of Madison and Mbumo. Sorry, Mbumo being sort of placeholder for Diaby. I just don't know whether he's fit or not. And then Eze plus sorry, I think I sorry Madison, Son, Salah, Mbumo, Eze, but then Mbumo being a placeholder for Diaby was sort of my idea. But
Yeah.
now with Eze gone, that obviously means I need to actually probably keep Mbumo and then maybe stretch towards Diaby to sort of afford a similar structure because I don't really have too much confidence in Gordon or even Neto just long term because I can't or the structure that I'm trying to create at least I can't really afford having Neto and then let's say having even a third forward to rotate with him.
Yeah.
So I really wanted someone who would be playing every week and then maybe only rested on a terrible fixture. So, for example, my plan was Eze to be benched in game week 9 when he plays Newcastle and then actually play a Newcastle defender that week, play 4-4-2. But in
Yeah.
general, to sort of accommodate for a 5.6 player, I think Gordon's maybe an exception, but he still has this suspension, which is very tough.
Yeah.
Um, you don't really see the value in, let's say, playing Neto week on week. So I wasn't too fond in such a structure. So now I'm actually looking at investing into a Hanless draft. But either way, Dallo does look like good value. Now, I know obviously United's results are horrible, but I still think from a defensive point of view, when you look at teams like Sheffield United, Luton, Fulham particularly as well, these teams, hopefully you'd be able to get a clean sheet in one of those games. And Dallo obviously gets a lot of bonus points just due to style of play. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting thing. But as you said, I mean, Rashford, for example, I think he was early subbed because of the Casemiro red card as well. So that's helpful for his minutes in the weekend. But you can already see United, they are sort of spiraling down. Haaland probably the only bright light so far. And I can understand people dropping, even Fernandes as well, who seems a little bit more of a balanced pick because Rashford actually was subbed off early last weekend. So you're already starting to see not only is he playing out and out left wing, he's also sort of having to accommodate for some of these young players that they're sort of
Yeah.
rotating in and out because they don't have a default starting 11. And you're seeing, for example, Medjugorje and Pellistri play, and even Garnacho coming on. And then Rashford, I think, had to go towards the right wing last week, and then
Yeah.
also was hooked off early. So it's a pretty bad landscape to own Rashford. And yeah, when you have, like, say, Son and Madison staring you in the face with Luton away, it's pretty tempting.
Yeah, so you're definitely getting rid of. So I've got your current team, back on the screen,
Yeah.
but you're definitely getting rid of Bruno. You're definitely getting rid of Rashford as it stands.
Yeah, I mean, I might if I actually go Haaland-less, I think I'm sort of forced to go Bruno
Yeah,
because
yeah,
with
because you
Saka
got the
being out,
yeah,
you need a fifth midfielder.
yeah,
So I might do that. But obviously wouldn't have too much faith in Bruno, and he would just be a placeholder for Saka or Odegaard on game week
yeah.
10 when they play
I
Sheffield
like
United
that.
at homes. That's really just the whole purpose of Bruno if I was to draft him back in the team. But if I went with Haaland still, yeah, I would definitely drop Bruno.
Yeah. So that frightens me going without Haaland. It
Yeah,
actually
I
frightens
think it
me.
should. It should.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
is a
because
huge decision.
yeah, absolutely. I remember like start of last season, I wasn't even going to put Haaland in the team. And and this just
Yeah.
like for me, it was my second season, still new to FPL, still trying to like work out, and I hadn't really followed Haaland's journey or anything like that, so I wasn't really aware how good he may be in the Premier League, right? Or and we
Yeah.
didn't know at the time, right? And so I think it was my brother-in-law who said to me, "You may want to put in Haaland in your team." I think he looked at my draft and he was like, maybe throw in Haaland in there. And I was like, okay, cool. So I'm glad I did because obviously he was off to a great start last season. But we've seen him drop off a little bit over the last couple of weeks. And so yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts on, if you're contemplating a no Haaland draft. And I think there's loads of managers right now. I know there's a bunch. I mean, so for those that have just joined as well. I am recording the spaces and I am sort of capturing the feed of spaces as well. So, give us some reactions as well so we can kind of get that captured on the video. So how many of you are actually going no Haaland in your wildcard now, wildcard later, or even thinking about it for a future wildcard? Give it a thumbs up or a love, or, if you're seriously considering getting rid of Haaland from your draft. Okay. I'm gonna do the same as well.
Pretty quiet room here,
Yeah, yeah, not many.
but also
Oh, there's a
normal, I
few.
think.
Yeah, there's a few. Oh no, there's some thumbs down. So there's, it's like I'm also frightened, maybe reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I it's a really tough one because, you want to it's scary because he's what, like 92% also owned. So, obviously, if you're not captaining Haaland, you're already sort of, you're owning Haaland, not captaining Haaland. It's already going to be painful because there are some
Yeah.
good fixture runs coming up where you may want to captain Salah, you may want to captain, Son. Everyone's thinking about whoever's got Son or Madison, probably more likely Son. They're going to captain Son in the next game week because they're playing, Spurs are playing Luton. But there is, and Haaland's been dropping off a little bit, but it's bloody scary when you think about no Haaland whatsoever with 190% EO, pretty much against you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the interesting thing about Haaland is, looking at his underlying stats, he is actually on a better trend than last season on just pure expected goals per 90. But the big difference, obviously, he is not finishing at almost, a world beater pace because I think Chase, obviously, someone who does visuals on FPL. If you haven't seen him already, he sort of has a rolling XG delta graphic that shows, for example, the quality of finishing of all sort of world athletes within football, and you'll see players like Son there, obviously exceptional finisher, Madison, for example, Messi as well. But Haaland was actually one of the few strikers in the world to sort of be at that sort of insane finishing pace as someone who doesn't take free kicks, which obviously is usually high goal conversion from low xg, right? And Haaland obviously doesn't take long shots as well. So the
Yeah.
fact that actually he was a very positive finisher, from an xg versus goals delta, was already tells us that he is, almost like a once in a lifetime human. But this season he just hasn't been that. So the West Ham game being a great example where he's gifted effectively 3.2 xg,
Yeah.
and I think he blanked, right? Or he scored one goal. So ultimately, this is probably the time to think about going Haaland anyways, because the way I see it is, obviously, even if you, let's say, contextualize fixtures, like a good sort of test that I usually give people is, what is City's expected goals at home, and what is their expected goals away, and even, for example, goals scored and um, goals scored at home versus away in the previous season. I think last season they scored
Yeah.
maybe 30 goals away and then 60 plus at home. So obviously fixtures are important, and even home and away is important. And this is a run where Haaland seriously has worse fixtures compared to, let's say, Salah and Son. So I think Salah is definitely on my draft 100%. But
Yeah.
I do think there are some structures where you can still afford Salah Haaland, and it does come down to transfer value. So if you are, let's say, welcome and you have good transfer value, then Salah Haaland is probably quite easily affordable. But do you have to let's maybe sacrifice a player in that position that I was talking about? So maybe, step down to a player at the Gordon or Neto price point.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're probably quite unhappy with the team because you want to be putting out a strong 3-5-2. And as far as I've seen, a rotating defense is probably the best way to play. And so that's more funds being allocated towards defenders.
Yeah.
Keepers, you probably don't need to rotate with. I've already experienced some pretty poor keeper rotation so far,
Oh, yeah.
to no luck. But yeah, I think that's the tough thing that you're sort of asking yourself, particularly for those who have been hit a little bit worse with price falls. The question, I suppose, for them is Salah versus Haaland, and then what else you can do when Haaland's taken away from your budget. And even though I have a relatively good sort of team value right now, I'm still considering Haaland out, as I said, because I will be captaining Salah for most of these fixtures, except for, I think the clear Haaland captaincy fixtures are going to be Brighton at home, and then obviously Bournemouth at home, so 9 and 11. And it really depends, right? If you're someone who mentally would love to captain Haaland for more than a 9-11, then I think obviously you've got to put Haaland in your draft. But for me, just because I think 9 is even debatable because Salah obviously has Everton at home,
Yeah.
different quality fixture. But Brighton,
That's
obviously,
it.
look, the way that they're defending right now, you probably still want Haaland, to be
Yeah.
honest. So that's the way I see it. I think I've got two Haaland captaincies up until effectively game week 13.
Yeah.
And game week 13, sorry, would be a Haaland captaincy as well, Liverpool at home, just because unfortunately Salah doesn't have a great game. But you could even captain Son there. So that's the interesting question I think you have to ask yourself, like whether you're first of all going to captain Haaland as much as you think you would usually, because like naturally, I mean, this season I haven't even gone off Haaland captaincy once. Um,
I've done it twice.
yeah,
I've done it
yeah. I
twice,
remember. Do you want
and
Madison and maybe Saka even,
it's
or
yeah, I did Madison in game week 5, and I
yeah?
had gone Salah in. So I actually own Salah
Oh, Salah
at
Game
the
Week 2.
start.
Yeah,
Yeah, at the
yeah,
start,
yeah.
but
That's awesome. That was a good one. That was a good one.
I fell behind so quickly in the first 2, 3 game weeks that I decided to spread the funds and try and sort of
Mm,
stay with the
yeah,
pack to some extent, and I have to admit I think that helped at the time, but it's one of those things. I think I did one of the website where you go in and you put in your, if I had not changed my team, where would I be, that kind of thing.
mm,
So it seems like I've definitely been better off with the transfers that I have made. I think I gained something like 20 points in doing so. So, and that would have included, players like Trippier that I brought in, players like Madison that
yeah,
I brought, so I feel like it paid off, but in hindsight, should I have done that? Not, I don't know. Like now we've seen some consecutive returns from Salah, and I have to admit, it does also frighten me going into Liverpool's fixture run coming up without Salah as well. So I think from
yeah,
that perspective, I completely agree with you. Like there is, there's definitely value in having both Haaland, both, well, in my opinion, having both Haaland and Salah there's definitely value in that. I think what's throwing some of the curveballs now is like owning players like Trippier, who isn't an issue,
yeah,
is returning, has the potential to bag some of those double digit hauls as well, and I imagine we will see more of those. And I think out of the premium defense, there's not many that you want to go to, like, and in fact there are so many good budget defenders that, and I say budget, but they've just been priced so well this time round.
yeah, yeah.
And I think
100%.
that's what's made it very challenging. I was chatting to Night Talk, KT, very briefly yesterday, and he said to me that there are roughly 41. I'm just going to read this out. He said there's roughly 41 players that have an EO of over 10%. 19 have an EO of over 20%. So that's a lot of
Yeah,
players, like from a pool of players to pick from. And I don't have the stats from, last season, but, in terms of pricing, there are so many good picks that we can make now. And so, I think FPL planner Tien, who's listening as well, he actually posted a tweet, maybe Tien, you can post it on the spaces here as well so everyone can see it. There are some 50-50 sort of choices now coming up for us, like the Sun. Can Madison cover Sun? Can Diaz and Darwin cover Salah? Can Alvarez and another forward, well, not forward, but another midfielder like Foden cover Haaland, right? So there's a couple of now 50-50 decisions that many managers going to make, because we're trying to fit in all of these premium players into our team and we can't do so. But there are some really good budget picks going as well. Are there any budget picks that you've sort of thought about? So like for video sort of purposes, I've actually got my team on
yeah,
screen. I'm going to post my team as well, because I could really do with some advice, for my team, especially. But so I'm going into game week 8. So for context, I'm going into game week 8, not playing my wild card. So I've got 2 free transfers. I have made 1 transfer, and the 1 transfer that I have made is Estupinian to Cash. And that was mostly because Cash was going up, and my sort of, the price rises and price drops, I've been hit really hard with those this time round. In the same
yeah,
week, I've had multiple drops and multiple rises from my team. And so it makes it very difficult. Like for me to get in Son now and to even consider, it looks like I can't paste it. That's really annoying. I'm going to have to save the screenshot and have it in my camera roll with how bad my team looks. That's fine. But I can't. So for instance, I can't bring in Son by taking out Saka in one move. I haven't got
yeah.
enough. I haven't got enough money to do that now, which is very annoying. So I've just posted my bus team in the chat, and yeah, it's really really frustrating. Like when you look at it from that point of view, like Yeah, and so I've been catching some of the price rises where I can, and I felt really strange, again going early on my transfer. I've done that once before, this season, and I've not felt good about it. But yeah, I've got point 0.7 in the bank, and I've got, Saka potentially an issue, might be okay. I've got Wilson potentially an issue, might be okay. So there's loads of might be okays. Rashford is just an issue, right? And so I could go Rashford to Son is basically what I was thinking, but I'm definitely considering
Yeah.
a wild card in game week 9. So if I don't catch some of the price rises and falls that we've had more recently, I'm struggling to build a wildcard 9 team now. And so I feel like I'm in a bit of a shitstorm with that, which isn't ideal. And those that are watching, watching the video, I didn't actually mean to pick this particular mug when I was making my coffee this morning, but I've got a mug that says "fresh out of fucks," and I am, at this point, very much fresh out of fucks about some of the transfers I can make between now and game week, for game week 8, and I'm happy to take one hit, but do you have
Yeah.
any advice, Fran? What do you do
I
in my
think.
position? I'm 3 mil, by the way, at the moment as well.
Hmm. So what I would say is obviously press conference is probably the most important thing for you, given that Saka already had his price fall, and I don't think anything's going to happen to Wilson. But there is a likelihood that maybe the two of them actually won't play, and at which point I'd probably just suggest for you to wildcard really, because um,
Stop.
I think no, honestly, this isn't me trying to troll, but like I think I don't think your team would substantially change too much, maybe from wildcard 8 to 9. Now, obviously, there's going to be an international break. There are some players specifically like Son
Yeah,
who
yeah.
could. He's actually been called up and he could get re-injured because I know he's been dealing with like an injury for a while. So I understand. I think you probably would have to just dead end, right? So you just
Yeah.
have to look for transfers like who actually is a good midfielder for this week. And it's quite tough, isn't it? Because even the West Ham players who are at cheaper prices don't have a particularly good fixture. They've got Newcastle, so there's no way I would touch them.
Mm,
I think you just need to look at dead enders. I guess you take that -4, see who you would replace Wilson and Saka with if they're injured, and
yeah.
then call it a day with his team. So Rashford, you probably have to keep reluctantly. I mean, you can argue that
Yeah.
he was rested. And look, it's still a home fixture, and you're actually out of options right in the midfield position. We don't even know if Diaby's fit. So
That's right.
when I look at the midfield, I probably think I would have loved to punt on Eze, but maybe you can just go for someone like Richarlison. I don't know. Maybe he'll get a start actually at that sort of price point. I mean, I think Sterling, I have no confidence in him. So maybe Luis Diaz as well is an interesting punt as well in the midfield position, just because
Mm,
it's a Brighton game. If you sort of value that and think that he starts as well, and I think he would have good
I
value to start because obviously Gakpo and Jota,
yeah.
um, they're out. And then you've got a chance to just go for like a Luis Diaz punt maybe versus Brighton. So that's interesting. Forward position,
Yeah, I think so. So like if
Solanke as well is
Wilson
there, I guess.
Yeah,
Or
true, true. So I was thinking about just dead ending in for game week 8 and like
yeah.
if Wilson was out,
And you
I'm
can actually go
very
Watkins as well. Actually, I was
yeah, I
thinking like
can
just even as a dead end, right? Because
yeah,
he might rise as well. You'd
that's
capture a
right.
price rise within that before the deadline.
Yeah.
And who knows? And if you go for, let's say, that cheaper midfielder from Saka,
Yeah.
you'd probably actually benefit, right? So that could be something.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think my options at the moment, so if I take out Saka, then I can't get
Yeah.
to Son, but I could bring in another midfielder. And you're right, like there's Richarlison. There's a couple of options there potentially,
Yeah.
to go for. DRB, another one if he is fit. Again, I don't know if we know enough about that either. So there's too many maybes. So I'd rather not go from one maybe to another maybe. I'd rather sort
Yeah, it's
of,
tough because I think with players like that too, you never know. I mean, they could be fit for the game, but it could be a similar situation to Son where, maybe Emery thinks, okay, you're only going to play 75 minutes today because we have seen Diaby be, hooked off at 75 minutes. That's not abnormal. I think
yeah.
that happened, for example, to both Watkins and Diaby when they were in that sort of playoff game before
Yeah.
they qualified for the Europa League officially. So that's something to think
Yeah.
about.
I do have my eye on Darwin as well. So just
Yeah. Oh,
given
that's actually
Gakpo,
a great punt. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and that's all dependent on Wilson. So like, if I think Darwin's more likely to play than Wilson at the moment, with how things stand, you know. So given like
Yep.
what's happened over the weekend, and I think it's probably a good time to have a really quick chat about, you know, about that as well, like the
Darwin.
two red, yeah, the two red
Okay.
cards, right? The two red
Yeah,
cards.
yeah. And
Yeah,
the
be good to
illegal
get your perspective,
discounting of the
you know,
goal.
as a neutral. So for those that don't know, Fran is actually a completely neutral when it comes to the Premier League teams, because he doesn't support any of the Premier League teams, and so makes a lot of his content unbiased and fairly neutral, which is always a delight as well. Being a Real Madrid, you know, supporter, but yeah, it'd be good to get your perspective on that, because there's a lot of controversy around it at the moment, isn't there?
Yeah, I guess there's no controversy that Liverpool were sort of defrauded in that game. Like, I mean, I actually, I think already at that time, the wild card was brooding in my mind, and I was watching Tottenham versus Spurs thinking,
Yeah.
sorry, Tottenham versus Liverpool thinking, okay, most of the assets I want to go into are within this game. And this is a nice little, viewing session for some of the players that I might bring in.
Yeah.
And I mean, Salah was incredible, first of
Yeah.
all, robbed of an assist as well, might I add. And Luis Diaz had a great finish. But yeah, I saw that and immediately tweeted, why is that not offside? Or so why is that offside? And then
Yeah.
then I think around 25 minutes later, at halftime, it was released that the PG Mole had made a mistake, which was very obvious even to the naked eye. Like,
Very
you can,
obvious. Yeah.
yeah. So it's
You didn't need
so
to put the
absolutely
lines
mental
in there.
decision. And not only that, but that directly has an impact on every sort of outcome after that game, right? The Sun goal, for example. I mean, hard to say whether that actually should have happened at all, because it came as a result of play being resumed after the goal was discounted, and little things like that. And I mean, also, I mean, to even concede in the last minute like that it must be heartbreaking as a Liverpool fan. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I was actually pretty mad, because I actually wanted a result for Liverpool, at least 1 point for that sort of robbery of a game. So
Same,
I think
same. I don't
that
think it's
was
going to
pretty
happen,
horrific.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I don't think
was.
anything will happen in terms of like the game will not be replayed closed
No.
doors or anything like that. But
I, th-
ultimately,
I think
yeah,
Liverpool should
these
get a
sort of
point, though,
events
surely.
happened. Well, I mean, it happened to Arsenal last season as well, right? When they
Yeah,
were playing Brentford, and these sort of results do have implications. For example, Liverpool are firmly within the title race this season, and
exactly.
you can see that this Liverpool team is, I mean, their defense, considering, for example, their expected goals conceded, considering that they've played with 4 or 5 yellow cards this season, is actually
Yes.
still top six,
It's
which is that's
insane.
insane to think about it. If you've been playing
Yeah.
with an average of like 10.1 men or
So
something like that,
we've been
yeah,
playing with 10 or less for what, three
yeah,
matches now? Is that right?
yeah.
Three matches, I
Yeah.
think it's been, or
Yeah. Three
four? Three
matches. Yeah.
matches. And I have
Yeah.
to, like, this is my unbiased Liverpool supporter view. We've
Yeah.
played better down to 10 players and 9 players.
Yeah.
Like, they looked so good, you know, they looked so good.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think the team should be, you know, obviously that they are proud, but we should all be proud of, you know, what they managed to achieve, you know, in that match itself. And, but look, at the end of the day, it's not Spurs' fault. It's not Tottenham's fault. There's a lot of like shit
No, it's
going
not.
around
It's not.
on Twitter and other sort of channels and articles out there about, you know, how Ange, look, I'm a huge fan of Ange, you know, he's an Aussie, but also just been following his career a bit.
Yeah.
And,
He's a
you know,
nice
huge
guy.
fan. Yeah, he's such a nice guy. And you know, all this stuff about like Ange not really calling out, you know, how that was an unfair call, and, you know, all of that. Putting all of that aside, it's not Spurs' fault when it comes to this. This is an issue that needs to be dealt with. There's been some really horrific, you know, calls being made by VAR, and I think the audio was released, and I think I caught that this morning when I woke up. I was like, oh shit, they actually released the audio for this VAR
Yeah.
decision, and I was horrified listening to that as well. So yeah, really, really interesting to experience that. Anyway, that's sort of enough on that. But I do think that Darwin is a really good pick for the next fixture. I mean, they're playing Brighton.
Yeah.
I think it's Brighton
100%.
away, isn't it?
It
Brighton
is Brighton
away.
away, but still, I mean, it is Brighton
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
who,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. And the whopping that they got. Yeah, I I think both of those teams will want a reaction. I think it's going to be a bit of a goals fest, potentially, that match, because Brighton will want to sort of try and bounce back after their defeat, which was, just horrific. I was very surprised to see that scoreline as well.
Yeah, that was a bit of an aberration, to be honest.
Yeah,
It's so different to the Sheffield United game, for example, because if you see like that game, I think Newcastle accumulated like 5.38 XG, whereas in the Brighton game, they accumulated less than 2. So it's like, obviously the result was probably still deserved Aston Villa, but not nowhere near in terms of a gulf in quality between, like, let's say Sheffield United and Newcastle, but the result was probably just about as bad.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to ask you, so Aston Villa, obviously, Watkins got his hat trick and everyone's gone, crazy with bringing in Watkins. And he's obviously, I don't know if he got a price rise post hat trick.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
So he's up to, what, 8 mil now, or 8.1? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I haven't
8 million.
Yeah, okay. So he had a price drop. I think he started at 8 million, had a price drop, has gone up back to 8 million. Do you think he's worth it at 8 million when you sort of look at the average of some of the forwards and the midfielders, when you look at the price point of view? And you've got like a Diaby who looks fantastic, as well going forward, almost like, he's playing that second striker kind of a role alongside Watkins. And I know that there's an injury sort of, potential there. But for people like me who are wildcarding in 9 or maybe even later, is Watkins the pick that you would want to bring on your wildcard when you've got other players that are like, you've got Alvarez, for instance. And I know you're a huge fan of Alvarez. I love watching Alvarez as well. He's just so good to watch, and even the free kicks and stuff. Right, every time I see Alvarez and Foden next to the ball, I've got Foden in the team.
Yeah.
So every time I see Alvarez and Foden, I'm like, please, Foden, please let you be taking that. Alvarez, just step away. And then I see Foden stepping away, and I'm like, shit, Alvarez is going to take that. Fuck, kind of thing. But and he did, and he got a goal, right? And so I keep seeing Alvarez and keep thinking, I wish I had not gone Jackson and brought in Alvarez when I had the opportunity to bring in Alvarez, but I couldn't because I had Foden, and I didn't want to switcheroo around there as well. But Watkins though, 8 mil when you compare, is he a good pick?
Yes, I think he obviously is a good pick. I think it just comes down to the fact that his fixture run is truly quite beautiful. He is not on penalties, so that does take away from some of his value. And I do think Watkins is at that sort of price point where you have to first of all factor in whether you want to go for someone like Alvarez instead, and then make that consideration in your mind as well of whether you actually value, let's say, having a little bit more of a premium midfield. Because let's say if you believe, for example, Son is a season keeper in your team, presumably you probably also feel the same about players like Maddison, Saka, and even maybe arguably Odegaard, who I think is a little bit under the radar. And obviously now he has, a percentage of pen share as well. So you have to sort of think going forward, it's quite nice to maybe actually own both those Arsenal midfielders. And that question will be in your mind if you spend that sort of money towards Watkins, what is the trade-off you have in the midfield position? Because you have mentioned, obviously, within the defense, it's, yes, of course, Trippier is great in isolation, but also there seem to be some defenders. For example, Colwell is such a good example where, you've got a left back at 4.5 million. Can't really go wrong there, considering Chelsea actually looked like a competent defense for once. So when you talk about Watkins, I think, the consideration in your head is, what are your sacrifices in the midfield position, and are you comfortable with them? Particularly, let's say, on a Salah plus Haaland drafts, right? If you're wildcarding towards that sort of structure. Whereas if you're, let's say, going Haaland less, then obviously Watkins makes complete sense because you're just going for all-out premiums. You can afford all the midfielders that I was talking about and Watkins. But in a situation where you do own these two, which will probably be the template per se,
that's right.
It's very hard to actually own Watkins, I would say, and not have those trade-offs in the midfield, because a lot of people are actually doing something like Son and Maddison, then actually going for some cheap midfielders. But actually the question I would ask is, if you think Son is a season keeper, then you actually need at least 0.7 in the bank to actually go towards Saka from Maddison. And where's that money going to come from? So maybe it does make sense to actually just keep Alvarez, for example. For example, with you being a game week 9 wildcarder, you're starting with that Brighton at home fixture. So you've almost taken one bad fixture from Alvarez off the calendar and now you're
Yeah.
just comparing the next three for Watkins versus Alvarez, which would actually look a lot better for yourself.
Yeah.
I am actually looking at Alvarez as an Alvarez owner who owns him at 6.8. So there's even more of a consideration of price there for me. It's 1.2 million of difference. And actually, I would probably keep Alvarez in this instance, even knowing that he has bad fixtures on the calendar, such as United, which honestly, United look terrible right now. But Arsenal, I think they're a very serious defense at home anyway. So it is going to be a bad fixture for Alvarez, but I'm going to hold him. For you, I think it's
Yeah.
actually even easier to actually bypass Watkins if you like, Salah plus
I
Haaland.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and I have been in my ever so light amount of drafting that I've been doing for my wildcard
Yeah.
because it is going to feel like a long international break as well. But I think I'm edging closer and closer to pulling my wildcard for game week 9, just because I've got loads of issues, and like I say, I've got loads of issues in my team. Like the very fact that I don't have a bench, right, it makes it very challenging, and my goalkeepers are an issue. I've got Turner and Pickford. I want to switch those around as well. But when I was looking at my team and thinking about how many players I would probably keep, I've actually got a good sort of 4 or 5 players that I may want to keep as well. And so that makes me slightly hesitant to go wildcard now versus
Yeah.
wildcard 9. I might feel differently, and I could probably go into go into game week 9 without even pulling the wild card if I want
Yeah.
to just keep playing the poor bench that I have and just keep going basically as long as possible. But I don't really want to do that, and I think I can't bring in Salah, for instance, without taking a hit.
Yeah.
Either
See,
way,
that's what's nice,
whether
isn't
it's
it? Like,
now or later, yeah,
yeah, because you're moving on to Salah's sort of prime captain
yeah.
candidacy game. I know obviously he competes with a good Haaland game as well, but it's like always nice to actually move into a premium asset on a good fixture. Whereas I am, for example, moving to Salah on a average fixture, I'd say, with Brighton away.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a pain. Um, we've got about 43 people listening live on Spaces, and thank you so much for tuning in post Champions League. But if you also tuned in during some of the Champions League matches that were on as well, I really appreciate it. For context, I've been doing these Spaces for about just over a month now, and been putting them on YouTube as well. So I'm recording everything, and I've had so Fran is my second guest, and it's so lovely to have a conversation with Fran today. And I will be sort of publishing this on YouTube a little bit later, once it's sort of ready to go. But you can listen to this again on Spaces and or watch it on YouTube as well. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Fran, and just getting some of the reactions from the audience as well. It's nice to see more people tuning in, because then we can see more hearts and thumbs ups and even the thumbs downs for the Haaland, no Haaland draft. That was scary. There was a few people who sort of put it in the chat as well, like a thumbs down. I was like, oh shit, is it the Spaces? They don't like the Spaces, or what's going
Yeah,
on there?
no, no, no.
There are a couple of questions, so I'm gonna just go to questions. We have been going just over an hour as well, and I've always tried to keep, whenever I've done it solo, it's really funny. I've tried to keep them as short as possible, but the shortest possible has been about 35 minutes, 37 minutes, and I don't know how the hell I sort of end up rambling that long. But these are supposed to be very off the cuff rambles and a quick sort of chit chat type of thing, and not necessarily like deep conversations around our teams or anything like that. So I'm going to see if I can find the questions that we've got. But if anyone has any questions while we're sort of going through the existing questions that we have, please do pop them in the chat. And these are very much one-sided. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to take any speakers because we're not pulling the audio for the YouTube video from Spaces. So yeah, sorry, I'm not going to be able to take any speakers on the Spaces itself. So a question that we have from Sarah, so I've got this on the screen as well. Question that we have from Sarah is going without Haaland a foolishness on wildcard? So I think we've covered a little bit of that. Or is it viable to go Salah, Son and Alvarez and ignore the Norwegian for a few weeks? So we covered a little bit of that, but any sort of direct advice on that one?
Yeah, I don't think it's foolish, but obviously you are taking on, as you said, 92% of the game. That it could change. Obviously, Haaland's ownership could drop. There are a lot of elite managers who have already gotten off of Haaland. FPL Psycho is one of them. I'll just name drop him, and he's not even on a wild card. He's just done it as a transfer. So I think the question, as I said, is always if you look at, let's say, the next 4 to 5 fixtures up until 13, when he plays Liverpool at home,
Yeah.
that's probably your next best window to get back onto Haaland if you drop him. And your question to yourself should be, how many times am I going to captain Haaland, and how much value do I think I'm going to get from, let's say, dropping Haaland off my draft? I personally think I'll captain Haaland twice, and that sort of makes me 50-50 between whether I go for a Salah Haaland draft and whether I go Haaland less. And as I was saying as well, from a template point of view, the structure when with Eze being injured, that sort of makes it harder for me to actually justify a Salah plus Haaland structure, because I'm looking for midfielders at that sort of price point that I think I could play most weeks.
Yeah.
And now we're sort of lacking in them. So I think it's also a question, as I said, of transfer value too, going back to that. And ultimately, I am someone who's probably good. I'd rather go Salah only than Haaland only for the next few fixtures, because I don't really play for effective ownership. I play for points, and I think I'm going to captain Salah more times than Haaland,
Yeah.
and Son included as well. So for that reason, I'd be tempted. For example, if I go Haaland less, I think it is a chance to, for example, move into someone like Trent. Now, there is going to be a question, of course, of whether Sobo has, for example, reduced like the efficacy of Trent as a pick in FPL. That's sort of looming in the back of my mind. But you can maybe even go Trippier as well, right? For example, you said Trippier is not a problem for you, but he could be a problem for you when you're creating a Salah plus Haaland draft.
That's right.
So
that's exactly
one of the questions to ask.
Yeah, and I think that's why I sort of called it that. It was like, I have so many issues, but the one player that I'll probably be taking out is the player that I don't have an issue with right now. So it's very frustrating.
It's tough.
We did have another one, not really a question. I think it was more of a statement around price change is the real struggle. And any advice from you, Fran, around like those that are thinking about wildcarding later and, sort of making transfers, up to that point, do you sort of jump on some of those price rises and price drops? You mentioned that you're not playing for EO. I love that. I think I had a really good chat with TN, FPL Planner about this, and I think I sort of talked about it in my last spaces and YouTube as well, where you want a player that is giving you points, right? But how do you deal with some of the price related drops and issues when you're trying to play that way as well and you're putting EO aside at the same time?
Yeah, I think, what Praz said makes quite a lot of sense in terms of, there will be fresh problems every single game week that you have to address, and suddenly that will change the landscape of FPL. So you will always find a way to navigate around, even if you, let's say, have really poor team value, which is, I think it happens by circumstance, right? For example, let's say I went for all these United picks expecting them to do good. They've done poorly, but, if they did good, they probably would have risen. Now, obviously, you can say that I just made a bad call there with owning them, but I would say the outcome has been pretty poor, but I didn't make those decisions based on price rises or price falls. I just can't tell how well, for example, Son might do. I think good examples are all the picks that did bad in game week 1, like Kai Havertz, Richarlison. People owned them, struggled. I jumped off of Kai Havertz to suddenly move into Sterling when he was a differential, and that was simply just to maximize points. But it wasn't like I suddenly predicted that Raheem would rise. He just rose because he performed well. And as long as you continue to stay within the logic of, I'm trying to maximize my points and I'm trying to improve the sort of overall point value of my team, then I think that's the best thing to do. But sometimes as well, it does make sense. For example, Salah plus Haaland is actually a structural issue. It is a price value issue. Like, if you really can't see a way to fit them both in your draft, then maybe you do have to take into consideration price, right? And and that's why I've wildcarded earlier than I expected to, because I felt that sort of pinch in terms of price, especially since I knew I was probably going to own further, let's say Rashford, Fernandez falls and further falls to maybe Mbeumo as well. So these sort of things kind of come into my consideration on things in the future. And it's also about your environment. For example, let's say if Diaby is not fit, then suddenly I'm probably having to keep Mbeumo within my draft, no matter what. So these sort of things will change over time, and you'll get new information and you'll get some picks. For example, Gordon will come back and Game Week 9 wildcard. It might seem to make a lot of sense to actually go for Gordon instead. Yeah. Because you've avoided the West Ham fixture and suddenly he's got a great run. So
agree.
It is different.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point that you raised there, because Gordon's only 5.6 at the moment, and then we've got a Neto who's also a 5.6, and I think I saw a question. We've got one more sort of earlier question, but I think just the flow of conversations heading to that I think someone posted up their team in the chat, and we won't sort of discuss too much of that specific wildcard that FPL Pratt has, put up on in the chat. But, it would be great to just have a quick chat about the budget picks that are worth considering as part of our wildcard draft. So you've got Neto at 5.6, you've got Gordon at 5.6 as well. Are there any others sort of that kind of came to mind when you were, doing your draft for this, upcoming game week?
I think with Eze being out, I think you might have to consider Solanke. Just at 6.4. He is at a quite a good price. In terms of other budget picks, I think defender wise, I would say maybe just keep an open mind to someone like Porro as well. He's not really a budget player, but definitely a differential. As far as defense, I think unfortunately you might have to sort of play around a lot of 4.5 defenders. So it's a case of, playing players like Burn, or even like, for example, let's say you go for Gordon, actually. You need someone who actually would probably fit into a 4-4-2 for this week. So you might even need to look at someone who is an immediate good fixture, and Burn actually isn't that person. So in that circumstance, you might even consider someone like Colwell instead, just because he's got Burnley away from home. And even though you might not play Colwell till game week 15, if you have a deep bench, you don't really care about that.
That's right.
So he's got good value.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so the last sort of question that we had from some of the earlier questions that we got were, hi, hope you're doing well. That's from PSB. Doing great, thanks, PSB. A general question and not team specific. It's your third season and Fran's sixth season. So wow, 6 seasons, Fran. Do you guys see yourselves approaching the game any differently compared to, let's say, 3 or 4 seasons back? And how has the game evolved according to you?
Do you want to go first, or
okay,
you let me go first?
Okay,
that's fair.
No, I can go first. I can go first. Mine would be very quick. And those that have sort of heard me talk about my seasons previously, they'll know that this is only my third season, and my first season was pretty. It was okay. Like, I finished 190k. And like you mentioned earlier, Fran, I was taking hits left, right, and centre, took 30-something hits, played all my chips much earlier. I think I played triple captaincy in the second or third game week, had no idea about double game weeks and the rest of it, right? Definitely playing a lot differently now, and even more so this season, I feel. So this season, because of those price points and the EOs and just like the general sort of picks that we've got, it's been very, very difficult to make up ranks and progress, so to speak, as well. And so, yeah, it's been a huge challenge, but I feel like I'm playing differently now than I was previously, more so because I'm looking at it as a challenge, and I'm looking at it as I need to change what I'm doing, but stay true to some of the FPL sort of, I guess, like rules and values that I've created for myself, and and try and sort of do a few things differently along the way as well. And so I'm actually playing a lot different to last season, and definitely different to my first season, but I'm genuinely finding it quite a challenge with which picks to make, because there are so many options now. And so yeah, it's a good thing and a bad thing for someone like me who's I would say quite a new FPL manager still. I'm learning different ways to approach the game, but I imagine it's very challenging for people like you, Fran, who've been playing for six seasons, and we've got loads of people in the chat, I imagine, that have been playing for more than 10 seasons, up to 15 seasons or so. It's evolved a fair bit, but how's it been for you, Fran?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I've only played seriously for 3 seasons, because obviously, as you see my rank history earlier, I was not really playing the game back then. But the biggest change for me obviously has been sort of embracing analytics, I would say, just making sure that, for example, for every game of football I don't watch, to look at expected data, to sort of update my mind map of how strong certain teams are and how strong certain players are. So like a good example is, I mean, someone like Salah, who we all know and trust, for example, is a great FPL pick. I mean, the way he's playing this season, yes, of course, people would say that he's creating a lot more, but you can see it through expected data as well. Like, he's averaging literally like 0.66 or 0.63 expected assists per 90, which is almost double or 2.5 times or even triple some of his previous seasons. So the fact that he's leveled up so much as a creator is astounding to me. And that keeps my sort of mind fresh in terms of understanding what exactly is going on with a lot of teams and a lot of managers.
Yeah.
So I pay a lot of reference to that. I do use models as well to play FPL Review, being a primary one. This season, I've also partnered up with Fantasy Football Hub, but
Yeah.
ultimately, I think the biggest thing that's changed is I take a lot of effort into planning ahead and trying to be objective, and not, for example, get sucked into any sort of form of biases that I have. And also, yeah, also ignoring effective ownership. Funnily enough, my first real full season of playing, I did ignore effective ownership because I literally didn't follow any people on social media and it wasn't on social media.
Yeah,
But
that's
then
right.
that second season, it was a lot of FOMO. I was sort of just looking at people's teams, thinking, okay, this pick looks really good, this team looks really good, and I just wasn't really in charge of my own planning. And that's something that's completely changed now that I've taken on this sort of approach. And I've invested a lot of time. I still listen to all the press conferences. I still listen to any kind of news, rumors as much as possible. And that's sort of the time investment has also gone up a lot as a content creator too. I'm on and around every single deadline, and I think it's massively impactful too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think for you in your case, a lot of your decisions have been very sensible. So, the only way, if for example, I was at a rank like that now, which I could be, right? For example, if I didn't, if I would, I could have very easily gone for Havertz in gaming three, and
Yeah.
I would probably have a horrific team with horrific transfer value now. And I'd have to say that I'm gonna have to trust the same process. And I look at that every week as well. Like I revise how close I am to one decision or another decision. I was even contemplating, for example, a gaming three bench boost, and then Luke Shaw suddenly gets injured. That the bench boost is cancelled, and instead of going and holding Havertz, I go to Sterling for a 19 pointer. But this is pure luck, right? It's just how close it is, and I think it comes down to just accept outcome is outcome, but know that your process is solid in terms of how you're planning for fixtures ahead and things like that, and just trust yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, and that's exactly what I've been doing. I'm trying to. I was having a chat with a friend the other day about what does it mean to sort of make good decisions but still get a bad outcome sort of thing. And
yeah,
surely a bad outcome means that it wasn't a good decision. And I was like, well, like actually no, I disagree, because I think you can
yeah,
make good decisions, and it's like in lots of different sort of scenarios, right? Not just playing FPL, but just life scenarios. You sort of have the best intent for based on everything that's there in front of you, and you make decisions about sort of even popping to the shops. But popping to the shops was not a bad decision if it decided to rain. Not taking an umbrella, maybe, we don't have that much of an issue like that in Australia, but it just goes to show that you can make some really good decisions based on data in front of you, eye test that you're doing, all the things that you've got access to, you watching content creators, reading articles, all of the things, right? And you can make the best decision based on all of that and still not get the outcome, and that's definitely how I felt with the Wilson pick, right? Like I
yeah,
know, look,
exactly.
to be fair, Wilson is injury prone, like, so that's there in the background, but he was fit, he was playing great, fine as well. Every time he sort of comes on, whether it's a sub or starts, he's been playing well. So him pulling his hamstring and not playing the last match, couldn't have predicted that. And so I don't feel bad about that decision. I brought him in, he got a goal, got me some returns. So, it is what it is from that point of view. So, yeah, I think you can make good decisions still, despite sort of the outcomes that we're getting. And yeah, that's been definitely the narrative of the season so far.
Yeah.
And I don't like talking about it from a variance point of view. I think every time I hear the word variance, I'm just like, oh, please. But it is to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just going to check the chat if there's any other questions that came through. I don't think there were. I think FPL Prime Time did say, hi Meera, is game week 19/20 on your radar at all? Man City, Brentford blank, followed by a potential Man City double. Yes, it's definitely something I have thought about, but given where I am and how bad my team is, I don't think I can probably manage to push out my wild card all the way to then, and something I will have to sort of plan around. And at the moment I've got 3 city players, and I'll probably be dropping one of them going into, I might keep on hold of Walker. I quite like how Walker's playing, so I might sort of end up keeping 2 city players throughout, right up until when we've got access to the next wildcard, so right up until the end of the year or so, game week sort of 19/20 sort of mark. Have you done any thinking around that, Fran? Has that sort of hit your
Um,
radar to sort of plan that far ahead? I feel like that's so far away.
so around that time, I think Newcastle have good fixtures. So, when
Mm,
you own these sort of picks, you can probably think about, let's say, moving, because I actually plan on keeping Alvarez and Haaland. So I think one of them will have
yeah,
to go around then. Also, alternatively, you can just see it as something similar to last season when we had a similar circumstance where we had a blank game week with Haaland, where you can just see it as just an opportunity to save two free transfers. Just go
mm,
Haaland out and Haaland in if you're, let's say, on a Haaland structure. And if you're
yeah,
Haaland less, I mean, if you are that psychopathic, I guess you could just not own Haaland until the double game week, right?
mm,
That could be a plan, and I know some managers are intent on doing that. But that feels a little bit too far in the distance for me to really think about it like with all seriousness. And who knows, like someone like Flecken could even be dropped
yeah,
by then. So very
yeah,
hard to even say how we should plan around it. Ultimately, it's a
yeah.
bad double game week for Brentford, right? So it's more a case of what are your plans for City, and it's not too hard to really get into triple City.
No.
Um, ultimately,
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that's probably going to be. I think that's all. I think we've kind of covered most of the questions that had come through and some of the earlier ones that had come through. Um, Let me just do a last check, and apologies if we don't get to cover if something has come through. I sometimes find that when I'm looking at the questions that come through on Spaces, they don't come through properly, so I have to like check a few times
yeah,
as
it is
I'm
a
sort
bit
of looking
buggy.
at it. Yeah, it's a bit buggy from that point of view. I'll have to sort of consider, you know, what to do with these. And so, like for context, everyone, these have been super experimental. It's been almost like just over a month that I've been doing these. I'm having a lot of fun doing them, mostly because I get to talk with the wonderful FPL community on Twitter or X, and that's where I've probably learnt the most as well. So joining the community, engaging with some amazing managers, meeting a lot of managers over here in Australia. We don't have such a huge community over here in Australia compared to the UK and probably the US as well. But the community that we do have in Australia is fantastic. Our leagues and run by FPL Planner and some of the other guys that are creating content over here and doing the regular meetups and things like that. It's such a great community, and I think without them, I wouldn't be able to. In fact, I'm heading over to Canberra today. So I'm based in Sydney. I'm heading over to Canberra today. I'm planning on catching up with FPL Inzaghi Ryan and also FPL Planner who's TN in Canberra this evening, probably for another therapy session with them both over a few beers this time. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, the community is amazing, and this has just been a great way of communicating with the community and getting those interactions and getting some advice and just improving my game. And that's what it's been there for. And I feel like it's been an absolute luxury bringing on some guests as well. I've had Mohan, join previously on as a guest, and Fran. It's been absolutely lovely to have you and sort of have the conversation around some life stuff as well. And you've had a lot going on, and congratulations that you got to celebrate your wedding finally with your friends and family in Colombia
Thank you
as
so
well.
much.
It's been really good, and also, I am going to be posting this on YouTube as well. So with the video, you can see our sort of faces. You can see my eye bags because it was morning when we started as well. But thank you so much for tuning in. And please do sort of give us a heart or a thumbs up or a like, on here. You can do the reactions on Spaces. I'm actually just scrolling through so I can capture everyone on the video feed as well. So thank you so much for joining. It's been really, really lovely to have you all and get some of those reactions too. If you like this kind of content as well, please, drop me a follow on Twitter, and I'll post my YouTube channel as well if you're interested in sort of following it on YouTube too, and I'll post the video later as well. So Fran, where can everyone find you if because you're on TikTok as well? So do give us all of your
Yeah.
addresses.
Yeah, so it depends on which platform I'm on because on Twitter it's FPL double underscore Fran. On
Yeah.
TikTok it's FPL one underscore Fran. Um, on YouTube it's just FPL space Fran. So that's it really. But I'm mostly
Just
around on
follow
Twitter and
Fran.
YouTube.
Yeah, just follow
Yeah,
Fran
just
on
follow,
Twitter and you'll find
just
it
find
there.
me whatever way possible. Hopefully you do. But it's been really nice interacting with you. I haven't actually had a chance to really formally speak to you, almost person to person. So it's really nice to actually do
Yeah.
so because obviously we've been talking in DMs for a while. But it's so much nicer to do it this way. And I'd like to, of course, maybe catch you sometime in the future as well. But I think also listening to all your spaces so far, you're such an easy listen. And as well, as you say, with FPL, sometimes we get so boggled into, okay, what my transfer is this week. When do I wildcard? When do I chip strategy? But sometimes, yeah, it is nice to sort of peel back the human layer and just sort of relax a bit as well, because you can't master everything. Like even going back to the sort of hindsight thing, I like to always ask people, like, are they a professional gambler? And if they're not, then really stop putting hindsight takes all the time, because you should be making a lot of money with the amount of knowledge you have. Otherwise, just enjoy the experience of watching football games and hoping the outcomes go your way, ultimately, is what I say.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think that's a really good place to end. You know, you should be having fun with playing FPL. It is a game. It should be fun. And if you're not having fun, I think I had that realization over the last couple of game weeks where I decided to, you know, sort of price myself out from some future moves because I wanted to get Trippier and I wanted to get Wilson. So I went there and, you know, I was like, yeah, this is a future Meera problem and I'll deal with that later.
Yeah, we've got a wild card, so
yeah, exactly. And you know, there's only so much planning that you can do as well. So thank you so much, Fran. Pleasure to talk to you. Pleasure to have you all as an audience as well on Spaces today. Thank you once again. Links will be sort of posted, and hopefully catch you in the next one. And so we're going into international break. Good luck with your tinkering if you are on wildcard. Good luck with, you know, game week 8 if you're not on a wildcard. People like me, I'm hoping for a green arrow this time. It can only get better from 3 mil, surely. But thank you once again. Thanks for joining us on another off the cuff chat with me, FPL Mez. Thank you again. See ya. Bye.
Bye.